Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Amanda Ray, and when I was 17, almost 18 years old, I left the polygamous cult known as the Order. If you're interested in hearing more about that, I will leave the links to my story in the description box down below. Today we have my cousin Allison here. She also has her story that's on my channel, and I'll link that in my description box down below as well. And if you guys remember, Cult a Cup of Coffee episode 43, we talked about this story, but we talked about it live, and we did find out some more information on a video of an alleged confession to the murder of your great-grandpa. So we're going to be diving into that story a little bit deeper today, and stay till the end of the video and we'll be talking about the confession that the new information that we just came across. So also, for those of you who don't know, when the numbering system works out in the Order, I mean, I feel like most people do know that, but when you become a member of the Order in the beginning of the Order time, you're given a number. And her great-grandpa got number 43, which means he was the 43rd person to join the Order. But there's a story behind that, and Allison's going to kind of talk to us about it. He was LDS, though.
Yeah, he was baptized LDS as a teenager. His family was converted. His family lived in Kentucky, and they were converted into the LDS religion, and so they moved to Utah for the LDS, yeah. So yes.
Yeah.
Long story short, yes.
Was he from Louisville?
He was from Louisville, Kentucky, yeah.
How old was he when he met his wife that he decided to
When he met his biatch.
Allison doesn't like her. She was named after her, and she changed her name after her great-grandma.
Yeah, my name was Jenny Allison. But I'm not very fond of Jenny, so when I had the opportunity to change my name, then I just dropped the Jenny. And
You have no middle name now?
I have a middle name. My adopted parents picked Araya for my middle name.
Oh, that's cute.
So, how would you like me to start?
I guess we can start with, we don't have to, if you want to know like the details of like when he was born and the time frames of those, go to the live because we already covered that stuff. I kind of just want to dive deeper into how he got converted and when he became a member of the Order, that and then beyond, right?
Yeah, so Charles and his family moved to Utah, and
number 43 is Charles.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll say Charles Mattingly. There's a lot of talk of Charles Kingston as well. So Charles Mattingly, number 43, he moved to Utah when he was about 17, and that is where he met a girl named Jenny Berg. They had a class together in high school. Charles was just like smitten by Jenny. He loved her. Charles really, really liked Jenny, and Jenny, she didn't really care for Charles. I think from what it sounded like, they went on a few dates, but she wasn't really interested in him, but he was really interested in her. And Jenny's mom loved Charles, and so Jenny's mom ended up passing away, and so Jenny decided to start dating Charles because she felt like it was kind of like
for her mom.
Because she knew how much her mom liked Charles. She felt like it was a way to show her mom that she loved her, that she respected her. So she started dating Charles. Not long after they started dating, then Charles proposed to her because he had already been interested in her for a while. They got engaged, they got married in the LDS temple, and then not long after, then they started having kids. It was around the Great Depression time, and so they struggled financially. So they were kind of like looking for a couple or another family to rent with, or to like split a home with, just to save on bills. And so Jenny's sister, so this is something that I was confused with when I told the story on the live, but Jenny's sister Agnes was married to a Stan Pratt. Jenny's sister Agnes and Stan Pratt had...
So Jenny's sister Agnes joined the Order before Jenny?
I mean, so I think so. I think Agnes ended up divorcing Stan, and she left him. Agnes ended up divorcing Stan and marrying somebody else. So I'm assuming, because Stan was in the Order, and so Agnes must have been in the Order, but eventually Agnes wasn't in the Order because she left.
I guess I didn't know that, is that she knew Stan through Agnes.
Yeah, so that's... I feel like now I can read a little bit from here. So Charles and Jenny were looking for another couple to buy/rent a home together to save on bills. So Jenny and Charles, they did that with Jenny's sister Agnes and Stan. Jenny's sister Agnes would meet Charles downtown every payday to get a portion of his earnings to pay the bills, but the bills never seemed to get paid, and they were getting deeper and deeper into debt. So Jenny and Charles decided to move again. And so they were moving back and forth between homes, and they kept having more kids. When Jenny had her second or third kid, then Stan Pratt, her brother-in-law, came to visit her in the hospital. And this is when Stan told her about a group of people living in Bountiful and how they were living God's law of consecration, united order, and the fullness of the gospel. And this really intrigued Jenny, even though a lot of Jenny's family didn't like Stan, and they knew him because one of the sisters was married to Stan. And some of the other siblings would even tell the sisters that Stan was possessed by an evil spirit. So she was swayed against Stan, but she was intrigued by all of the talks of this group living in Bountiful. And so Stan gave Jenny a book to read that Charles Kingston No. 5 wrote. And after reading this book, Jenny asked Stan to take her to one of the order meetings. Charles Mattingly worked Sundays and felt bad leaving Jenny alone, so he was happy to see her hanging out with Stan and Agnes so much because he didn't want her to be lonely. And so Jenny went to Sunday church meeting the order held in one of their tents, because this was early back in the day when the order was, some of them were still living in tents, and they held their meetings in tents.
The holy spot, right? In the tents.
Yeah, and they call it the home place, in the home place in Bountiful. So Jenny went to one of those church meetings, and she remembers seeing Eldon Kingston there, the one who started the order. And so I don't know exactly what meeting this was, but she sat through the meeting, and from this meeting, she saw the order and the people of the order as some of the most humble, just generous people that she had ever met. And so she was invited to stay for dinner, but after that meeting, then Jenny felt wrong staying and eating their food just because she had learned how much the people had given up. So she declined dinner, but before she left to go back home, then she was told to keep everything a secret, everything she learned that day a secret, even from her husband.
And we were discussing that because I thought it was so weird that they would tell her to hide it from her husband, what they were talking about, but I think we came to the conclusion that maybe they just wanted him to hear it from them.
That's my best guess, because to get her to not talk to her husband about it, then they probably just told her, he needs to come to the meeting and hear it for himself. He does. We don't want you to be the one to relay it to him, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And then eventually he does, right?
Eventually he does. Jenny asked Stan, her brother-in-law, if he could arrange a meeting for her and Charles Mattingly, her husband, to meet with Charles Kingston and Eldon Kingston, the leader. And so in 1942, both Jenny and Charles were convinced to sign a document to join the co-op, but had to wait to be voted in at the New Year's meeting. So they spent the year, because it must have been earlier that year, but they spent that time waiting for the New Year's meeting, trying to prove that they were worthy to be a part of the kingdom of God on earth. But Jenny was the one who lived near the co-op, and Charles was always working out of town. And I think around this time, while they were waiting to get voted in, then Charles worked in Wendover, so he wasn't really home often.
He didn't know what Jenny was getting into.
One day, Jenny helped Stan and Agnes clean their house, and they offered to pay her for that, but Jenny insisted that they turn that money into the order, because at this time then they had introduced the idea of the law of consecration to Jenny, and so she knew that they turned their money in. So instead of them paying her for helping them out that day, then she just was like, no, turn that money in and I don't need it. And so that was the start of Jenny and Charles having a financial statement with the order, was the money that Stan and Agnes turned in on her behalf.
So then she had a bank account then with the order at that point.
And Jenny was pregnant again and wanted to have her baby the same as all of the other women in the co-op, so she had her first home birth with her 4th child. And the New Year's,
just because the order girls were doing it, she wanted to try it?
She wanted to be she wanted to be the same as them, because she wanted to join. And if that's what they were doing, then that's what she was going to do.
But she was having the rest of her kids in the hospital?
Yeah, her first 3 kids she had in the hospital.
You didn't mention that part. That is weird to think, I want to be here so bad that I'm willing to
risk my child's life.
Basically.
But she had her first home birth right before this New Year's meeting. And so Charles went to the meeting alone, because Jenny had just given birth, and that was the meeting that he was voted into the co-op and was given the number 43.
What year was that?
Oh gosh.
It had to have been the
It was 1942.
1942. So they got voted in at the end of the year.
Yeah, they got voted in at the end of 1942, so they started 1943 as members of the order. And I think that the child that she had was my grandpa, because he was born in 1942. In November.
At home birth.
Pretty sure.
Wow, I would think she'd be like, okay, tried it, not for me.
I know, but
she committed herself to it.
She's like, I'm ready. I was born for this life.
For the Lord. That's why, okay, this is just my speculation, but that's why I really think it was more than just the spirit she felt. I really think she had something going on with Stan. Because why would you be so, like, devoted so quick to, or maybe she needed something to believe in, I don't know. Just seemed a little odd.
I know Jenny, she sounds like a very special kind of person to be just completely change her life like that. For what?
But maybe, and this is again, I'm just talking out of my butt, but I really feel like how their story of her marrying your great grandpa, number 43, Charles. I feel like if I say Charles, people are gonna get confused. So I'm like, number 43. I feel like her marrying him was really that out of obligation to her feeling bad for her mom, so she never really wanted to, so she probably was kind of sad in the marriage. So then she probably getting attention from her sister Agnes, and then her sister Agnes's husband Stan.
Yeah, and the other men in the order, you know, they wanted to take care of her, like stay for dinner.
Okay, it should be good. Regardless of it, sorry, I just want to say my last piece. Regardless of it, if it was like her wanting to be with other men or whatever, I think that just the fact that she maybe was having a unfulfilled life in this marriage, so maybe she's seeking some purpose. That's just my head about it, because I'm like, there's no way she just felt this Holy Spirit, you know?
Because they were already had their religion. They were LDS, got married in the LDS temple, so it wasn't like they were on the hunt for a new religion. This one just fell into their lap.
So as he's in Wendover, she's getting like further and further invested into this cult.
Yes, Charles worked out of town, and so Jenny, I don't know exactly where they were living, but one of the cities around Salt Lake City, but she wanted to be even closer to the co-op, so she moved even closer to where they were staying. And once again, Stan, her brother-in-law and sister, Stan and Agnes, had an apartment in Salt Lake City with a room available, or like the downstairs was available, and that was closer to the co-op people, and so she moved in with them, and he came back into town to help her move, and then he went back to work. But then Charles became sick and had to come home to have his tonsils removed and stay home to heal from that. While he was staying home, then the Order coal mine had started at this point, and Eldon had mentioned how they needed help at the mine, so Charles, number 43, offered to go work there for them.
And Eldon was number 1, so the creator of the cult. So when he is asked to do something with Eldon, it's usually like, okay, I will help out the co-op.
I think he also just like, you have a job for me? Sure, I'll take it. Because it was the Great Depression, and because he couldn't go back to his other job because he had just come home and had to be on leave to, for a medical reason. And so then, like, hey, now what am I going to do? And they had a job for him, so it's hard for me to believe that he took the job because he felt like he had to, because Eldon told him to, rather than he took the job because it was a job available. In the time of Great Depression. So Charles started working at the mine in Huntington in about 1943. Jenny was pregnant again, and Charles didn't want his pregnant, because Jenny ended up moving with him this time. Usually she's like, I don't want to move with you for work, I want to stay here. But this is the first time that she actually wanted to move with him and live with him, because he was working at one of the Order businesses. But when she became pregnant, then Charles didn't want her living up there, and so he asked Eldon if she could come back to Salt Lake City. And so Eldon, number 1, came to pick up Jenny, and Charles loaded up her stuff in Eldon's car, and Eldon drove her back to Salt Lake City. And Jenny writes about this car ride in her journal, and she talked about how Eldon was asking her about her relationship with Charles and how they were getting along, but Jenny didn't really tell him and kind of avoided the questions. But Eldon mentioned to her that he didn't think Charles treated her well.
And this is in her diary, right?
Yeah, and so Charles would visit when off work, and when Jenny was ready to give birth, Charles came back to Salt Lake City to live with her as she welcomed her, I think, 5th kid. Not exactly sure. But right after this birth, then Charles was drafted into the Army, and he served his time in the Army. I think he was gone for like a year, and then he came back in 1946. And so then in 1946, then he worked a couple odd-end jobs for the Order. He worked in Saratoga Springs at a farm. After he was done working there, then he moved back to Huntington to start working at the mine again. Once he was working at the mine, then in March of 1947, then there was an accident at the mine, and there was a skip trap that is used to haul tolls that 4 men were riding on. Even though it was against the safety rules, it was not meant to haul people.
It wasn't meant for that much weight to be on.
Yeah, it wasn't meant for that much weight, but it also, like, it wasn't safe for
For
a
humans.
person to be
Yeah.
on it. It was going, you know, it was going where a person shouldn't be going. And then also, like, I mean, this accident was pretty bad. It was against the safety rules for people to be riding the skip trap, but 4 men were riding it, and the brakes failed and the cable broke. So one guy lost his arm in the accident, one guy was killed, and 2 others were injured pretty badly, but they eventually healed. And Charles Mattingly was at the top controlling the skip trap. Cable on the actual car is what broke. And so Charles was the controller. So one of the guys who was injured but survived, we'll call Wilbert. Wilbert always blamed Charles for that accident, and so it was rumored that Wilbert swore to one day that he was going to get even with Charles. And just a couple months later, in May, Charles went to Logan to visit his sister, and so his sister has nothing to do with the order, but what they were living in Utah. So Charles went to Logan to visit his sister, and this is stories that his sister told. So after Charles's death, and one of Charles's sons did research on it, so he interviewed a bunch of people, and this is what Charles's sister said. But Charles's sister said that he came to visit her in Logan, and he talked about threatening Jenny with a divorce and taking the kids away from her unless she agreed to come with him and leave the co-op.
Why didn't he like the co-op? It almost feels like Eldon had something against him, and there was some weird rift.
So you have to also realize he was gone in the military for almost a year. And then when he comes back, then that's when he doesn't like the co-op anymore.
Yeah.
So I think just because he was away from his family for so long, he served in the war, and then he comes back and the co-op is, I'm sure, a lot changed in a year.
Yeah, and he doesn't like the things that are happening. Okay,
So-
I guess I was confused on that part. So he was the one talking to the sister about the divorce, so that means maybe Jenny had an idea that was going to happen.
Well, he came back and told Jenny.
Oh.
So yes.
So she did have an idea.
She had more than an idea. Charles was convinced that Jenny wouldn't want to lose the kids, so that if he threatened her, I'm taking the kids, that she would just come with. But I'm pretty sure that the reason why he stopped liking the co-op was because he was gone for a year and then came back and he's like, what is this? Why are we here?
Yeah, why are we still here? I want to go back to the LDS church.
Yeah.
So he tells his sister that he's gonna probably threaten Jenny with a divorce if she doesn't leave the order. And then he does do that.
He does. He threatens her with a divorce, and Jenny goes running to Charles Kingston number 5, telling him, like, all in distraught, that her husband he's gonna take the kids and he's gonna leave the order.
And Charles Kingston is Eldon Kingston number 1's dad, right?
Yeah.
So they're all in cahoots with each other. So she goes and has a meeting about her husband, Charles number 43.
With Charles number 5. Just kidding.
Should I confuse you more?
Basically, Charles Kingston told Jenny that he would take care of it and her husband would not divorce her. So a few days went by, and then Wilbert, the one who survived the accident, he was actually Charles's neighbor. And so a few days go by, and Wilbert came to...
Wait, didn't he say to Jenny, like, don't worry, he won't be getting divorced, we'll take care of it?
I just said that.
Did I miss that? Sorry, I was listening to what was going on up there.
Yeah, I just... Literally, I said that not even 10 seconds ago.
I can't believe I didn't even hear you say that.
I want to watch that too.
You're
Just
like,
a little
you
laugh at you.
Stupid little bitch.
You interrupt me and ask a stupid ass question.
Just kidding. I did. He says, don't worry, we'll take care of it. Meanwhile,
so Wilbert was the one who survived, one of the ones who survived the accident. He was also Charles's neighbor, and so he came to Charles Mattingly and asked if Charles could milk a cow for him while he went away to Salt Lake City. And Charles didn't think that he would be able to because he was sick. So Wilbert told Charles that he had some whiskey in a bottle in his cupboard at his house, and that if he mixed a little of it with water, then it would help with the congestion. Charles was hesitant because he didn't drink, but Wilbert assured him it was fine because it was just for medicinal purposes. And so Wilbert lived just below Charles and Jenny, and so Charles agreed to milk his cow. And when I say below, it was a hill, so he didn't live like downstairs. He lived like below them on the hill. Charles agreed to milk his cow for him while he was away, and so when the time came, then he did go to Wilbert's house and he got the bottle that he described and he drank some. And then just a few moments later after that, Jenny heard some blood-curdling screams, so she ran out and saw Charles leaning over the steps of Wilbert's home, and it looked like he was trying to make himself throw up. Jenny ran for help, but their oldest daughter ran to Charles. She sat with her dad's head in her lap, and he yelled, "I have been poisoned, my little pumpkin, I have been poisoned." So help came, but it was an 11-mile drive down the mountain to get to a hospital. Once Charles arrived, he was pronounced dead by doctors. So once he was pronounced dead, the doctors told Jenny, "There's nothing we can do, he's dead." And so Jenny started screaming, crying, "No, no, what have I done, what have I done?" And there was a whole investigation, and they did an autopsy, and that showed that it was black leaf nicotine sulfate that killed Charles. It was not whiskey that was in the bottle. It was black leaf nicotine sulfate. And so detectives came and interviewed everybody, and the cause was determined as an accidental poisoning. Charles died at the age of 30.
And what's the weird thing is, like, there's all these stories about how, you know, Jenny threw the whiskey bottle in the...
Yeah,
so...
so...
all this weird stuff, but we do know that she did manipulate the daughter into not telling information,
Yes,
right?
so there was a lot of... So the person who did all the research for this story, then he read a lot of journals of people who were there, and then he also interviewed a lot of people who were there. And so he would get kind of mixed stories. Some people said that Jenny got the whiskey bottle and threw it into the river. And some people said that no, the cops took the whiskey bottle. But... the oldest daughter, I think she wrote in her journal or something, or she just told the memory. When the cops came to interview her, the daughter, then Jenny told her to tell the cops that she wasn't there and that she didn't know anything.
So she was trying to manipulate the story a little bit.
Yeah.
And the weird thing, too, is after all of this, she hurries and marries Stan Pratt.
That's right. Stan's wife, Agnes, Jenny's sister, at this point... she left him, and she goes and is with someone else. And I know this from familytree.com, then you can look up like who people's spouses are. I didn't know if Agnes divorced Stan so that Jenny could marry him legally, or if Agnes divorced Stan and left. But it shows that she married Stan, got a divorce, and then married somebody else. So I could only assume that she left him. And Jenny ended up marrying Stan after Charles Mattingly's death.
And was legally his wife then.
Was legally his wife, and they had more kids together in the order. And then those kids went by Pratt.
It's just weird how that all happened, and all, like, I'm sure this Wilbert guy got interviewed too, but he never got blamed for anything.
Obviously, he was poisoned, but because his death certificate says accidental poisoning.
Yeah. But then they must have just dropped it because there's no proof on anything, and it could have been accidental, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But we have been told by, and recently, we were talking to someone, and they said that allegedly there is recordings of Jenny on her deathbed admitting, and it sounded like she felt bad that she did that.
Yeah, that she admitted.
Helped kill her husband. And so I don't know if that means she conspired with that Wilbert guy, or they were having meetings about how they're going to get rid of her husband Charles,
or if she conspired with Eldon and Charles, the leaders, and Wilbert, you know.
Yeah.
Because there was also rumors like Eldon and Charles Kingston were also just at the mine when all of this went down, and they're never at the mine. But then some people were like, no, they weren't there. So you hear both sides.
Yeah. And there were so many stories on this, but the one thing that is interesting is there is alleged recordings of Jenny admitting to doing it, but on her deathbed. So I believe it.
Later.
I believe it was Jenny, especially with even when you look back and how she's saying, "What have I done? What have I done?" And how she's manipulating the daughter to not say things. She was involved, in my opinion.
I believe she was too, and even if she didn't know what was happening until it was already done, I think then she realized what really happened, and she helped cover it up. So
Regardless, she should have at least had some jail time. Like, I don't know why they didn't just be like, oh, well.
Or some hell time.
She probably is
Maybe she's having some hell time.
But that's crazy to hear from your perspective, and to hear, like, in the order, Jenny was talked about as a good person.
Yeah, people really admired Jenny. She was very artistic. So there's a lot of paintings like hung up in church that Jenny made. Growing up, I always knew that I had a grandpa Charles who died of poison. That's how he died, was poison. But I didn't really think to question more into it, like what poisoned him? How was he poisoned? How old was he?
What caused you to research it? The book? Should we show the book?
Oh, mostly the book. So Jenny and Charles had a baby that was about 2 months old when he died, and that it was a son, that boy grew up without his dad, because he was 2 months old when his dad died. And so he was the one who did all the research, read the journals, interviewed everyone who was there, not everyone, but interviewed the people who were there who were willing to talk to him, and he put it all together in this book called Murder at the Mine. And so he goes into a lot more depth also after Charles's death and what life was like then in the order.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that we finally got to talk about this story, and that because we talked about it, I feel like it helped us uncover even more information, because we were going public about it, and to think about the fact that someone got away with it and they even admitted to, well, I believe they admitted to it. I haven't heard the recording, but from the sources that we were talking to, I believe the sources that we have, and the fact that they got away with it. I never heard this story either, so I'm glad that we can finally talk about it and it can be out there in the open. And like, everyone who was involved has passed away now, but the story should be told regardless.
Because this was 80 years ago.
Yeah.
But this is where my roots in the order started.
It's from the chaos.
This madness.
Yeah. It's
but
crazy.
Also, I learned that, so the kids, so Agnes Berg and Jenny Berg are sisters, right? So Agnes is married to Stan, and they have kids, but then Agnes leaves, but I believe some of the kids stayed in the order. So there were other Bergs in the order that I was related to and had no idea. So that was another thing that I uncovered by telling the story, by bringing the story public, was I always thought that the Mattingleys were the only one of their kind. Yeah, we were the only one of this kind. We were the only posterity of this lineage. But I come to find out there were other, they weren't Mattingleys, but they were on Jenny's side, the Berg side. There were other Bergs in the order.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to dive into all of that and to find out. You learn so much when you go through your like history. Yeah. And it's good information to know, but it's also good information for other people to know, and I'm sure other people in the order would value this information too. And just so you guys know too, this is like
public. Is that what you're gonna say?
Yeah, it is public.
You can get the book, you can read more about the book, and then also Ancestry.com, Familytree.com, like do the research, it's there.
I know that since we posted that live, this book is kind of hard to find, so I'll try to do my research to find a link for you guys to find the book.
I know, I tried finding it too.
And so it's not just Allison's lineage, it's also Jessica and Andrea, because Jessica and Andrea's mom is sisters to Allison's mom. So they come from that same lineage.
So we're Charles Mattingly's posterity. Me, Jessica, Andrea, we're Mattingly's.
But there's also plenty of other, I just say those names because I know a lot of you guys know those names, but there's plenty of other kids in the order that probably didn't even know this history existed.
I mean, I didn't in the order,
So it's good to have. But yeah, I will try to find the book link, and I will link that down below. I will also link Allison's story down below. And there are
pictures. I'll have to give you
pictures. I'll have to put some pictures up in here, but also I'm going to link down below. The author of this book did an interview with Dorris Hansen.
Yeah, and I didn't know that.
Yep, I'll link that down below so you guys can watch it, because it's actually really cool hearing him talk, and he's such a Mattingly too.
He is.
He's definitely Allison's family.
Yeah, so if you want to know what the Mattingleys are like, go watch his interview.
Yeah. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next Culty Cup of Coffee. Bye.